everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex and this is Big Baby Reviews. Today's Jack Kirby Monday, so we're taking a look at the next issue of his Fourth World Saga from the 70s. This is issue number 4 of the New Gods, September 1971 to be more specific. Continuing on the basic cover design that Kirby's been doing here as once he started back at DC in the early 70s. It seems like most of the image is in the bottom 2/3 of the cover and the top is mostly there for copy and title. I always like to read these because they're fun. To find the hiding place of evil gods, Orion plays the game of evil men. The Orion's mob, and the Deep Six is who we're going to be introduced to in this issue. The human characters that I've talked about before, New Gods, that will eventually fall by the wayside. Seems like Kirby was still trying to have the New Gods entertain some sort of human connection, right? So that, you know, we readers maybe connect more to the story. But eventually he's really going to go into the concept of superheroes as gods, New Genesis, Apocalypse and stuff, and the human characters will fall by the wayside, but we're still kind of early on in the series. I think starting with like issue 6 or something, we're not going to see these characters ever again, I don't think, in the New God series. Kind of disappointed by this cover, not so far as Jack Kirby's art. I think it looks pretty cool. Nice action shot of, I was going to say commodity, Orion and his Astro Harness. I just feel the inking is a little bit lackluster on this cover. And of course, that is Vincent Coletta's fault. The inking on the inside, though, is generally just better than what's on the cover. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there. Maybe the covers were done last and it was done under a tighter deadline. I'm not quite sure. I feel like the textures he's doing here is just stuff he wasn't doing on Thor over Kirby's pencils at Marvel. And again, do feel like Coletta, even though Royer's a better inker, is being pretty true to what Kirby's laying down in his pencils. This is a cool shot of Metron and Isak, or Esak? I'm going to say Isak. So one of the New Gods' children, right, from New Genesis. And what Metron has done is gone back in time with the boom tube to kind of look at Earth way back when the dinosaurs roamed the Earth. So pretty cool splash page here. And he's continuing on here that trend that he's doing in the Fourth World series of having the splash page and then the double splash page, you know, like a 1-2 punch combination, storytelling wise and layout wise. And here, I guess we're seeing the Neanderthals, or at least Kirby's vision of the Neanderthals, and maybe some more, you know, primitive half dinosaur, half human characters here. I'm not quite sure. They're all pretty grotesque looking, but in a cool Kirby fashion with the big square teeth, you know, the interesting textures all throughout. Really good job here on the inking by Coletta, I would say. Very Kirby-esque for sure. And Metron just returns Isak to New Genesis, and that's where he's going to leave it there for now. With those characters, we're going to move on to our main kind of character in the New Gods book, which is Orion. Sometimes the book is called New Gods, sometimes it's called Orion of the New Gods. At least in the beginning here, there's still some stuff that's being worked out. I mentioned before in past Fourth World reviews, you know, they're not quite sure how to refer to it, the Fourth World. Now I think just being defined as all the Kirby books that were put out in the early 70s that were interconnected, but here to refer to it as Kirby's Fourth World of the New Gods is just a little odd to me. It's not what it's going to be known by later on. And right away we're introduced to a character who we're never really going to get to know or see. He is dead already. He seems to have a very interesting helmet here, but his name is Seagrin, right? And he's being pulled out of the water. It's probably some, you know, seafaring character. And we've got Orion here in his alter ego as Orion, the police officer investigator, you know, coming upon the scene of the cops pulling him out of the water here. And like I said, this, you know, from this angle, you know, Kirby drew a very interesting helmet, and that's about as, you know, much of it as we're going to get. Kind of like that character in Forever People who was playing around with the mother box trying to get it to die. A very cool design that we're going to see very little of. We get to see him without his helmet here, and real far off in the background here, we kind of get a little bit of a sense of maybe what that helmet looked like. And I think the character probably had a pretty cool design, but always amazed at how good Kirby is at just creating awesome designs for throwaway characters. Every once in a while, I've said this before, he's got, you know, a dud character and some weird design. You know, Infinity Man, I don't think hits quite as well as some of these, but like, it's kind of unfortunate that this guy will never come back. Now, Orion is here kind of talking about the mother box in front of the other police officers and his partner, one of the humans from the team that's kind of working with Orion, an actual police investigator, is kind of trying to explain away what he's talking about as a sort of inside thing, officer, between friends. My partner's a bit shaken up, and Orion's dialogue wouldn't make a lot of sense to the police officer, probably, as he's talking, not as his alter ego Orion the police officer, but as Orion the new god. Not even Mother Box could protect him. The hidden enemy has found a way to thwart her. Now she can do nothing more but perform her last service for Sigrin. She takes him to the source probably being the afterlife of the new gods, right? And all of a sudden a storm kind of kicks up here, and we've got lightning and thunder. The dock catches on fire, so almost like a Viking funeral is what Mother Box is supplying Sigrin here. Ride the tempest, Sigrin. Enter the cosmic fire. The source will take you as a warrior who has given all. So again, that kind of Viking send-off that we've seen in movies and cartoons and stuff. We get another quick glimpse of Black Racer, who pops out of the fire there. So I guess that's to say, as he is kind of the fourth world equivalent of the Grim Reaper, he has claimed Sigrin, right? And off he goes back home. I like this panel here, I gotta say. Like these kind of movement lines that Kirby's included really makes it dynamic. You got some cool Kirby architecture here. The angle, that Black Racer is flying at is pretty cool. So this is kind of a cool sequence where, we start off from the same point of view and, close up to Black Racer's skis. And as he moves into and through the wall here to reintegrate with the war vet that is his alter ego, or has become his alter ego. We saw this a few issues ago, right? Was it last issue? I'm not 100% sure. But this is one of those storylines that, Kirby kind of introduces elements and then that falls by the wayside as well, and he focuses on other things, more notably the actual New God characters, not just the harbinger of death that is Black Racer. Cool shot of Darkseid here, really great, very sinister, right? Kind of from the sidelines off, in the background, just kind of keeping tabs on Orion and what's going on is what's being delivered through the dialogue here. And as usual, I've said this before, maybe on a past review, but, Darkseid by Jack Kirby never, gets worked up, stays calm, cool, and collected, never really gets involved physically, even though he could probably, destroy everyone and everyone knows it. He just doesn't feel the need to. He uses his mind, and as the leader, he's more of an organizational guy, right? So Darkseid will not stay long. His interest is not the battle, but the war. And the scale of it is indeed a game for the gods. The power of it, Cyclopean. Love that Kirby dialogue. Some people have criticized Kirby, but I think it's great. And yeah, so there's the human conceit part of the story here, where Orion and his gang of humans here who are helping him out, they're basically trying to infiltrate and find out more about Intergang, which is kind of a combination of the Mafia and the Mafia component on Earth that's working for Darkseid. And Jack Kirby clearly has always been very fond and had an interest in Mafia movies and the mob in general. So he's found a way to incorporate that here into more of his sci-fi kind of storytelling. Once again, Mother Box kind of, is there to help the plot along and give us information, help out our heroes in certain situations. So as they all touch Mother Box loudly activates. The entire room outside seems to rush into the room, into the mind, a whirling maze of buildings, streets, lights, and cars. So they're getting kind of an inside view of the city and what's going on, and more specifically what's going on with Intergang here. And they hear mention of a jammer, so they're going to go and investigate Intergang and find out what this jammer is all about. That's what we're getting in the sequence here. So they actually do accost this character, Snaky Doyle, and as he's discussing over this little communication device, which is almost like, the apocalypse version of Mother Box, I guess. They force him to answer the call, and what the person on the other end of the line says, report to the seashore base. It's your turn to babysit with the jammer. So again, we're on the road to finding out what that jammer exactly is. Now that they know where the jammer is, they're going to drive up. But of course, the driver is the young lady of the group, so as not to arouse any suspicions from the members of Intergang. And as they tell her to kind of drive off, you see her here kind of accessing a little bit of technology here, right? That you have to assume is some of the New Gods' new Genesis technology. And she gasses the members of Intergang. So the Orion Gang busts out of the car and into the seashore abode of Intergang to eventually find out what the jammer is. We get a shot of it here. Not again explained too much exactly what it is and what it does, right? I guess that you can assume that the jammer is there to jam up maybe communications with the new gods or to keep Intergang's activities under wraps, right, from the police or from any kind of legal repercussions. And then a beam just melts the whole thing into sludge. Of course, that's Orion making his entrance into the Intergang scene. And surprisingly, the oldest gentleman here is who knocks out this member of Intergang who's going to shoot Orion. And that's pretty much it for this issue. This is probably the most fun sequence, I think. Visually pleasing as well. Orion making his way through the seashore mansion and eventually through all these tunnels and Kirby tech and stuff into the actual ocean where he is confronted by Slig, who he calls a dog of apocalypse. Slig doesn't really appreciate it. Careful with your words here, with the Deep Six rule here. And I feel like Slig's color scheme is not yet, again, decided here. Something that happens a lot in New Gods, colors and costumes change a little bit from issue to issue. It's like things haven't really been established, and the colorist decides on something, and maybe Jack Kirby or one of his friends helping him out at this point, Mark Evanier, I think Steve Sherman as well was helping him out almost in a kind of assistant kind of position, pointing out that no, these characters need to be colored differently, so next issue he'll show up with a different color scheme. But yeah, so he introduces him to the world of the Deep Six, which is underwater. And as he says here, "Hail Orion, you are welcome to the world of the Deep Six," as was Sigrin, but of course they took care of him. He explains that they can control the minds of the dwellers underwater, right? The fish, the wildlife, to attack Orion, as happens here. I'm not quite sure what these are exactly, maybe octopus legs. It's never really specified. Orion using the mother box to get freed, but he's a little bit dazed there, and his eyes fall upon something that clearly unnerves him, but we're only going to be able to find out about that next issue. So again, artistically, these are probably the most interesting pages, the ones with the most Kirby kind of technological elements, the Kirby crackle for underwater, the most visually pleasing, and even color-wise. Once again, I'll say this, I've said it many times, I love the use of this deep blue here for some background, sometimes for nighttime, in this case for underwater. I think it looks really good. And that's it for this issue. Now, we get a light ray pin-up here showing us a little bit about New Genesis and its architecture and its look. Pretty cool. And as I talked about last issue, the books have become double-sized or almost, but not double the amount of story and art from the 70s, but basically reprints of stuff from the early late 30s, early 40s, I believe. I couldn't tell you exactly here. This one is just unfortunate because of the coloring, right? On the cover here, right, he's wearing that kind of mask, and then on the inside it's colored somewhat, but like the cover, but there's no actual line work defining the mask and how it looks. And I know later versions of Manhunter, his face is just kind of blue, just like his trunks and his gloves. So some major coloring mishaps, unfortunately, in this reprint. And as I've said, the reprint quality looks a little better than last issues, but not that much. I'm not going to talk too much about these, other than the fact that, even back then, this is at this point 30 years before what Jack Kirby was, or maybe even more than what he's doing in 1971. But Jack Kirby already had kind of that dynamic vibe to his art and the movement and stuff, and he's doing stuff that he doesn't do later on in his career. Like I noticed, and I'll point them out, a lot of panels where characters or elements are popping out of the panel, like here, and overlapping them, and that's something that Kirby eventually, it kind of falls by the wayside, and I don't feel like he does much of that later on in his career, which is odd, because it's another kind of trick in your bag that you can use, and he doesn't. There must have been a reason for that, but yeah, you see it popping out of the panel here. The buzzard here, who to me is pretty much the vulture right before the vulture. I like this design though, it's pretty creepy. I feel like the anatomy matches, right? Kind of spindly bird-like legs, which are cool. And the microphone here popping out of the panel, the hand popping out of the panel, creating those overlaps, I think are pretty cool. And just the dynamics and the movement in the bodies that he draws already was there in the early 40s. Just the aesthetic on top of it kind of changed, right? And I think his foreshortening, he started trying for more extreme foreshortening by the time the 60s and the 70s rolled around. But yeah, just major coloring mishaps in this issue. Sometimes the mask seems to indicate the look on the cover, sometimes not so much. Yeah, there's something I like about that kind of round, rubbery anatomy and musculature that he gives the characters here. Yeah, just some major coloring mishaps once again. You know, just not colored here. The gauntlet, the glove should be blue. You know, what's going on with his face here, I'm not quite sure, right? Not very consistent. We get a pinup of Calabac here. Is that a tattoo on his arm? I don't know. I don't think it actually ever appears on the actual arm of Calabac when we see him. I don't even remember Calabac having 2 toes like that. So another maybe inconsistency when he appears in the book. We'll try to remember that and compare it. But yeah, I don't think he's appeared in the book yet. So this is our first look at him. And then we get one last Kirby classic, as they call it at the top, by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. This seems to be obviously some sort of war story that I'm not going to talk about too much because it's only 3 pages. All right, there you go, guys. That is my review of New Gods, issue number 4 by Jack Kirby. Thank you if you are watching and you are subscribed. I really do appreciate your support. If you're watching but you're not subscribed, please do so below. It only takes a quick second for you, and it really helps the channel out. It helps us grow and helps get us out there to other people who are into comic books just like we are. Everyone, again, thank you for watching and have an awesome day. King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13. 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KINGCOMICS.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby.